So very good evening, all of you. Welcome back for this discussion. We're on third series or third round of this discussion where we are talking about legal aspect in optometry practice. And we're also discussing about the formation of optometry council steps. So if you have any questions, keep typing in the chat section. We'll take one by one every one question which is more prominent. If there are common question, we'll take anyone from them. So without wasting any time, I'm asking Mr. Rajesh sir to go ahead and present his talk on the legal aspect. Thank you, sir.
I am Rajesh Wadhwa. I've been introduced just now, and I am primarily from my heart and soul an optometrist, but I happen to have my qualifications in law with a specialization in medical law and bioethics. So today's conversation primarily is, as I said, in two parts. One is why should optometrists know the law, which is not just the professional law. It's not just that we are talking about, okay, what will HP bill bring and what is my professional. So this is the part we'll do today. And other is what are the laws applicable to optometrists? There are laws which are applicable to optometrists, just like they're applicable to others also. And there are specific laws which are specific to optometrists only. That part which are specific to optometrists only will be handled day after tomorrow. Until we do this, we don't have a base to go on to that one. So first thing we are going to look at is we should not be scared of law. Just like if someone sees a policeman on the road, one has a little tend to have an awe, just as Ajit sir was saying the other day. And similarly, sometimes one feels, oh, the law is something scary. But no, law is a friend that will help us. Do not look at law as a scary tool of harassment. It is only the fear of unknown. When I read law many years after having done optometry, I realized it was mainly that we were scared of law. Child sees a non-familiar face and is very scared. But if the child sees a familiar face, then the child is happy. So will we be once we get to know what the law is. We all want to follow the law. There's nobody who doesn't want to follow the law. Only we should know it and we should know what to do it. So many errors happen because we did not know that we were supposed to fulfill certain obligations. For example, look at these two men standing there, and on their back is written no standing anytime. If they had known there was no standing anytime, they could have stood a little on the other side. They could have moved 4 steps away. So sometimes heavy penalties are imposed because we had overlooked a small obligation long ago. Not paid rupees 500 when it was due to be paid, so we paid 5,000 as delayed payment or penalty. So by following the established law, we can confidently enjoy our professional and personal life both. You don't have to be scared of law. Just follow the law, that's it. And we should know the law because there's one sentence in Indian law, unlike many other countries, where we can escape the law by stating, oh, I did not know it. But in India, ignorance of law is no excuse to escape the consequences. If you say, I did not know the law, it does not mean they will pardon you or you will get any uh, special hearing or you will get a special privilege or you did not know the law, so it's okay if you did not follow. You have to be following it. Optometrists should have basic understanding about 5 legal challenges and aspects, especially when you're opening a new practice. So one is constitution of establishment. What these mean, we'll just go through very quickly. Constitution of establishment, the labor laws, the intellectual property rights, compliance of direct taxes like income tax, indirect taxes like GST, and scope of practice, which we will be elaborately discussing in the next talk, which is day after tomorrow on 10th of April. So constitution of establishment, what does it mean? It is very simple. It just means whether your establishment is a proprietorship firm or partnership firm or company or what. So one should define this right at the time when you create your clinic or your practice. Statutory paperwork increases from profits. Minimal paperwork is to be done in proprietorship. Most liberal you are, you don't have to file returns of your uh, being a combination or a union of people, a thing like that, and you don't have to take apples with the, say, some resolutions and things. So as a proprietorship firm, you just go ahead. So proprietorship is one. A little more work is done for partnership, and a little more when it is company. So the paperwork increases and the compliance issues increase when you go from proprietorship to partnership to a company. In proprietorship, the individual himself or herself, the natural person, that human being holds all the liability. If there will be profit, it will be of that one person. If there will be loss, it will be of that one person. You can't be distributing it among others because you are the proprietor. When it is a company, I missed out here on partnership because I want to talk separately about partnership. So proprietorship, and now for company, liability is not on the person but on the company. Company is a legal personality. Just like I am a person, you are a person, company is a legal personality. If some profit will come, it will come to the full company and it will be retained by the company. And it can be then distributed as the company may wish by resolution. Or if there is a liability, as much as are the assets of the company, that much will be taken from company, not from the person. So constitution of establishment, coming to partnership, which I said we'll talk after the company thing. This partnership firm will be two or more people, will be two or more people, and this firm can be either registered or unregistered. If it is not registered, liability is on partners again, not like a company. It won't go to the firm because the firm is not a legal personality until it is registered with registrar of firms. Now, firm and company registration means if registered with registrar of firms, a partnership firm can sue or be sued. Partnership firm will become a legal entity. You want to sue somebody of having done something wrong, yes, you can go and sue that person on behalf of the firm, or someone can sue you also. But that explains why if a check gets bounced in, say, you have an optometry practice or optical shop, someone gave you a check as a client and that check gets bounced. And if you are not registered partnership firm and you are in partnership and you are not registered partnership firm, then you cannot go to the court on behalf of the firm because firm is not an entity, it is non-existent in books. So that explains why some partnership firms can sue for a bounce check while others will not. So if you have a partnership firm, it will be good to have it registered. Whenever you have a partnership deed or other contracts, all contracts which you follow, you must put an arbitration clause. Arbitration means opponent with whom we have a dispute, the other party. We, if we have the dispute, we will go and a third person whose decision will be agreeable to all. Similar things are when we are into uh, say mediation, or we go for as I said, this arbitration, mediation, conciliation, all these proceedings can be done, and this can be very useful in cases of dispute. This is called alternate dispute resolution, or ADR, because it is simpler, it is cheaper, it is faster, and has lower social embarrassment. Because just as we say in Hindi, "Ghar ki baat ghar mein reh gayi." So two of the disputed party, third person, then it doesn't go to court or get published or publicized so much, or so that becomes much better. Labor laws. If we employ even one person, we are governed by labor laws. Part-timer also will be counted as a person employed with you, and the labor laws will apply. What are these labor laws? We need to register as shop or establishment or factory as the local state law may advise you. We need to furnish regular returns as prescribed. One of the simplest returns and simplest things which often is overlooked is Bombay Labor Welfare Fund Act, which has been notified in several states and union territories also. You check out in your state if it is there. Then if you are five or more people in your employment, then you need to furnish a return every 6 months, which is a single page, about 5 or 6 column, simple return, just that you got to furnish that. And missing this out may become a liability over time. Further to this, uh, December 30th, 2016, before that we could pay any staff member a salary only in coin, meaning only as cash. We could not pay otherwise. And now the president has promulgated this Payment of Wages Act ordinance, under which we can pay by bank transfer, or is being encouraged by the government now. Further, the government can make it mandatory one day. Maybe the government will make it mandatory. Okay, now you need to pay only through bank. There's another rule that we cannot pay more than 10,000 in cash for any expense in our businesses or establishments. We cannot pay any expense, means even salary more than 10,000 in cash cannot be paid. Minimum wage, for example, in Delhi is about 15,000 rupees. You can't be paying 15,000 to a person in cash. You can pay whole in check or part in check, part in cash. A combination is okay to give, but never pay more than 10,000 in cash for any 1 month salary. Similar is other things. You go buying anything which is more than 10,000, whether you went to buy an air purifier or a cell phone for the company, something. If it is more than 10,000, it will be added back to your income and will not be permitted as an expense if you pay more than 10,000 in cash. Few tips are, at the count of 10 employees, we need registration with Employee State Insurance Corporation, ESI as often called, or ESIC. And when the count is 20 or more, then Employees Provident Fund registration is mandatory. Government sometimes notifies certain professions and disciplines wherein it can be less or more than this also. Usually government specifies the lesser ones, not the more ones. Do not employ anyone below 18 years of age. It's very important. We are all against child labor. Be aware of this and do take care of this factor. After 1 year of working, women are entitled to maternity benefits. And the newer amendments which have come in, they say in 1 year, if a lady has been present for 80 days, it will be counted as 1 year working. And you cannot throw out a lady who is pregnant, and you have to give maternity benefits anyway. Now, single person can go to labor court. It will be called industrial dispute. If you go through a union or anything, union may not be the one in your establishment, but it will be going into the labor court or the industrial disputes court. Intellectual property. Name of your practice should be unique. Get the name registered as the trademark. And if you have a specific punchline, you can get it formally copyrighted. Publish articles, etc., but give acknowledgement to the original author. You can, it's permitted to publish and give acknowledgement. If you want to be very, very sure or pick up an extract from what someone else has, you can just write an email to them saying, I want to use extract from your publication. And 99.9% you will get an instant permission through email itself. But giving acknowledgement is also considered as okay. And for educational purposes, we can use any of the material which is not usually so much harmed because it's not a commercial use, it's for education, and people would not mind you're using anybody's intellectual property for that purpose. Here we go for the music. We play music in our outlets, or we have TVs running in our outlets, and something, some music, some movie, or some play, something is going on the television. Well, that's not for free. Someone created this music or program. They hold an intellectual property right on these, and often miss this that we don't take a license for this. We need to take an IPRS or PPL license for this, like Phonographic Performance Limited. They have gone in to give you a license as for on annual renewal. It costs just around 4 to 5 thousand a year, and all the parties are covered under this. All types of singers, musicians, everything, they will be covered into it. You can keep renewing it. There's no visit of a inspector or anything. It's just you apply to them, state yourself, it's a self-declaration, and they will give you the license. Now let's move on to taxes. There we go. So compulsory audit, if a professional's gross receipts are over 50 lakhs. If any of us is collecting over 50 lakhs in consultancies and we have only a pure consultancy outlet, we are not selling anything, even then we should go in for a gross receipt 50 lakhs, the audit has to be done. Compulsory audit if business annual turnover touches 1 crore where you are trading also. Potential for scrutiny if your credit card bill in a year is over 2 lakhs. So it's not that your credit card bill in a year goes over 2 lakhs and you'll get a notice for scrutiny. No, it's potential. The assessing officer has everything on screen, what you have done, what you have earned, what has you. Can your bill be 2 lakhs? Yes, it can be when you've shown so much of income. Or if someone shows the income, total income as 2.5 lakhs and 2 lakhs on credit card, it is quite unreasonable. Similar is if your electricity bill goes above 1 lakh in a year, or there's potential for scrutiny if you deposit over 10 lakhs in cash in the savings account. For other accounts, it is a separate level. For saving account, it's 10 lakhs. How will the authorities know what we did? That's another question. How would they know? It's not very difficult. There's a statement of financial transaction, a record of specified financial transactions that is furnished under the Income Tax Act. So, some of you who are deeper into taxation, you may know there is something called Form 26AS. This is downloaded from our income tax e-filing website. From the income tax e-filing website, we can see where all people have deducted my TDS, tax deducted at source. Suppose someone gives me a professional fee of 10,000 and out of that he deducts 1,000 rupees as income tax and deposits with government. That's the tax deducted at source. Who all in India did deduct my tax and how much did he pay and what was the tax is known. But now this 26AS will be stopped. And instead, from the same location on the website, from the same module, we will be able to download statement of financial transaction in which most of my transactions, like every cash transaction above 50,000, even if I deposited over that much amount in the bank, the PAN is linked to it and it will show on that particular statement which I download from the income tax site. Over 10 lakhs in FDR. Similarly, if you buy a vehicle above 10 lakhs, they will collect tax from you on source and it will be listed there. If you have bought or sold property above 50 lakhs, it will be noted. There's so many things which will be listed there and you'll be surprised. Oh, this has been tracked. This is already listed in my income tax portal and you would not even know. So don't think government does not know, they know more than what you think they know. So nothing to be scared of, just be uh, compliant and just be careful. Now GST, is it applicable to optometrists? That's another question. We can have two type of practice. One practice is goods plus our services. Other practice is service alone. So as healthcare service, we need not register for GST, but we still may need to. Why? Number one, every service provider with annual turnover of 20 lakhs or more, those in negative list. So healthcare is in negative list, for example. But this 20 lakh limit was increased to 40 lakhs when only for goods. So if it is goods, then it is 40 lakhs. If it is service only, then it is 20 lakhs. And this change was made from 1st April 2019. It's about a year back. Such service provider collects the GST. Anyone who is registered under GST will collect the GST and deposit with the government. And now there is a concept of reverse GST, not just GST, but reverse GST. Suppose I sell spectacle, I collect the GST and I deposit with the government. Similarly, suppose I, rather than selling, I was buying something and I was also depositing GST. That is reverse GST. So reverse GST will be some such cases relevant to our kind of work is on receiving sponsorship. Suppose I do a small event and I say ABC multinational company has given me 50,000 rupees for this sponsorship. It is compulsorily a, a reverse GST. I have to deposit the GST which is relevant to that to the government, not the person who gave me the money. Then legal services from advocate or law firm by any business entity, reverse GST will apply. Goods transport, GTA services as we say, goods transport agency, even there we need to deposit GST on what they have charged us. They will not deposit. Now, and to deposit this, registration under GST becomes compulsory. So reverse GST is something little tricky. It is widening the tax base and an indirect mode of increasing it. Now, next point is it applicable to us? Today, the date is 8th of April. 23rd March 2020, in public domain, this came less than 48 hours back. Day before yesterday only this news came in. We have an authority called Authority of Advanced Ruling under GST, which is called AAR. To this authority, anyone can pose a question with a fee. Fee is about 10,000 rupees. Anyone can post a question. I'm wanting to do this activity. What will be the GST? Or this is my query about GST applicable to this. Or I am making a cardboard box and I'm going to fill that with some special kind of metal. Do I pay GST on combined or on box only or on metal only? All that kind of questions go in. So what was the question here which was adjudicated on March 23, 2020 and came to public domain day before yesterday? On application filed by the applicant, namely OPTM Healthcare Private Limited, the Authority of Advanced Ruling, that AAR, observed that all the healthcare services are exempted from paying goods and service tax, and so it is not needed to get registered under goods and service tax GST. This is what OPTM said. They were wanting to open several physiotherapy clinics all over the country and they were wanting an advanced ruling. Will they really need to be registered under GST or not? Because they were going to give only services of physiotherapy. And the reply which came is, however, the word physiotherapy is not included in healthcare services, and therefore the authority ruled that physiotherapy is not exempted under goods and service tax. So once physiotherapy is not covered under that, this implies if for consultation only practice of optometry, total turnover touches 20 lakhs of rupees in a year, GST registration will be mandatory, just like an architect or management consultant, until the AHP bill classifies us under healthcare. So neither physiotherapy nor optometry is under healthcare for the time being. So all these consultancies are having the threshold level of 20 lakhs, where after which one would have to 20 lakhs in a year will have to get the registration. We need to understand the professional law also. This was all other things than professional law, and we have to understand under that the scope of practice, what is expected of AHP bill, and then are we covered under Consumer Protection Act also? What will be the safeguards for optometrists? And this, all this in our next longer session on 10th of April at 6 p.m. Link will be posted on the group. And the next two presentations which have been scheduled is, one is what I have just talked about, professional law for optometrists in India, day after tomorrow. I'll be presenting that, and moderator are Optom Ajit Bhadwaj sir, and coordinator, the expert Optom Oli. Yes, and the other one on 12th by Professor Monica Chaudhary, Optometry Education and Profession. Where are these going? Moderator and coordinator remain the same. So, what help can I extend? I am an optometrist first and advocate later. I will be glad to extend free advice on legal matters to my optometry family, be it whatever the check bounce case, ISO certification, trademarks, labor issues, will or writing of will or any other matter. So any other queries are welcome anytime. And these are my phone numbers and email. If anyone would wish to contact me, you're most welcome. And record this. And now I stop sharing this screen and we go back to uh,
Thank you, Rajesh, for this
yeah.
wonderful talk. And you see, as an optometrist, we need to understand what are your municipalities' laws, what are your state laws, and what are the central laws. So it is our attempt that we make you aware about all the laws. And in coming time, as we know that the council will soon be in place. So what are the council laws that will govern, and that the kind of ethics, the kind of structure, kind of clinic, kind of instruments you may require. So all the guidelines will be coming for the council, and optometry specific, which we'll be talking tomorrow, and subsequently maybe after 2 3 maybe after on 12th. So the point is that, as Rajesh mentioned, that you should not be scared of the law, but you should be aware of the law. So we are not trying to scare anyone, but our effort is to make you aware that what are your rights and what are your obligation to the government and to the state government, to the central government, and to the council at large. So gradually and slowly, one by one, we will be explaining you what are your code of ethics, what are your standards, what guidelines you may get from the council for specifically for establishing a refraction clinic, maybe a contact lens clinic, maybe your practice of low vision aid, what instruments are mandatory for each and every specialty. So these guidelines we will be getting from, you will be hearing from us, not what the government is talking at this point of time, but with our international experience and with the exposure in different countries. Thank you very much, Rajesh, once again. And now I think I'll leave it to Oli to take over the question and answer anybody who can have. Appreciate that. Over to Oli.
Thank you, Rajesh sir and Ajit sir, for this wonderful session. I think it's very informative in terms of our practice. We are what all the mandatory things we should follow at least, and we should be aware of. Now, coming to the question answer session, I think only two people raised question. One is related to today's topic, most likely. Next one of different thing. So let me connect with Mr. Kishore. Okay, there are a couple of them adding up. So first is Mr. Kishore. Please come up with your question. I'm not able to connect with him. Can Monica ma'am come up with her question, please?
Yeah, I wanted to ask this question. Excellently knowing things, of course, we're not in practice. So, what are the guidelines that are going to come into practice? How is it in states where or countries where there are regulations? So, do you think when India will also be regulated, there'll be guidelines to say that you need to have minimum this much of equipment and you have to follow? And what are the guidelines that will come possibly under the Consumer Act? So now if you miss out a diabetic retinopathy in US, you can be sued. You can be sued for even missing out a glaucoma suspect. Will such kind of things happen in India also? Are they likely to come in?
Thank you, Professor Monica. It's a very good question. Uh, we are going to be covered by Consumer Protection Act, yes, which we will be covering day after tomorrow. And there are safeguards to it. It's not just someone has sued you and you lose your night's sleep, nothing like that. We are very well protected. If the council is there to protect the public, council is there also to protect us. So don't worry about that. We will be discussing day after tomorrow. Yes, all guidelines will come in. It was observed about 8 or 9 years back that the number of malpractice suits which came in USA for contact lens practitioners were not for contact lens, but for having missed out on glaucoma. Yes, you are right. All that will happen. And when these things come in, the society also becomes a little more litigious, and we'll have to take our insurance covers and everything. We are going to talk about more nitty-gritties on this day after tomorrow when we discuss the professional law, what we can be sued for, and what are our safeguards, and how we can go ethically in managing our practices and enjoy. Yes.
Thank you, sir, for this kind information. Now, Mr. Gaurav Bharadwaj is there for the next question.
Sir, I just wanted to know, as for all clinics, it is mandatory to get registered with the authorities under Clinic Establishment Act. So do we optometrists also need to be registered under that? Because in central website, it has guidelines have come for the optometry practice.
The Clinical Establishments Act has been currently notified only in a few union territories and maybe one or two states, and it is still very ambiguous where it is applicable or not. It will come sooner or later. Part of it was recently put in on survey in Delhi also as Delhi Clinical Establishments Act. Please give your suggestions. All this is going on. We are not too much aware of how big it has become or is going to become. But once AHP bill comes in, we will be then definitely required. And optometry clinics in certain states are considered practically as health clinics, in others not. Even in lockdown, one state allowed the optical shops under essential services to be opened while other states did not. So this ambiguity is definitely there, and we are not fully clear about which all states are currently having clinical establishment.
Thank you, sir,
Thank
for the answer. Next question is from Mr. Anil Jain.
See, Rajesh, you just mentioned that in Delhi the cash salary can be 15,000. What is the limit in Gurgaon actually to the salary to be paid to the staff actually?
10,000 is the limit of 10,000 is for any expense all over the country by any establishment in
No,
cash.
the salary to be paid to the staff.
Anything, any expense, including salary.
Okay,
You can't pay a staff salary of 15,000 in cash. You can't do that.
but I guess you said in Delhi it is 15,000. Did I hear correctly? That was the case.
No, I said minimum wage. Minimum wage in Delhi is about
15,000. It can be mixed, but cash salary. And one more thing, you see about this registration thing, what you were mentioning. See, mines is a practice where it's a proprietorship concern, and we have an optometry practice plus the sales of glasses. Now we have been filing GST returns where optometry or eye examination charges were never, and the audit has been done. So if the new thing, what you are telling me that which has just been notified 48 hours ago, the optometry practice is not in the list. Now what will happen to the previous years, what we have filed since July 17, when the GST started?
Okay, I would put it this way. As you are filing the return, it seems there are two establishments in one shop.
Correct.
One establishment deals with goods and that goes to the firm's account, and other is of an individual, which is a clinic.
No, but the thing is, the whole structure is only of one firm itself. It is a firm, but there are the activities which does not attract the GST, where the eye test comes into that column, and there is a column of the sale where GST is attracted. So
I
you see
would put it this way, the GST not being attracted on eye examination is the information perhaps what we gave to our CA, that this is a medical service.
Okay.
But GST does not consider it that way. Let's hope for best. But yes, at least from future, if you are showing a separate consultancy fee that has to attract 18% GST, which
So
has
you'll have to
now
create
been
two firms in one.
either you have one separate firm which does only the
Eye test.
eye examination, and the equipment and all should be either in that person's name or how you show on paper how the equipment could be used, maybe free of charge or what for your service. And the other will be a good this thing. You can't escape paying GST now after this AAR ruling.
Okay, all right. That's very informative. We'll have to talk to the CAs actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Vajra.
Thank
And
you,
in
sir.
case you would want a copy of this AAR, just email to me. I'll send you one link and you
Sure.
can show it to your CA.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Great.
Thank you.
That's wonderful information. Now coming to the next question is from Trinity from OATN Group. Yes, come up with the question, please. Okay, we are not able to hear from you. Can I take next question from Mr. Kishore Bhandari? Yes.
Uh, I just wanted to ask, can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
I just wanted nowadays what we do is when in our clinics, some of the patients, there's an added service which you give. It's an optometric clinic, come glasses. Some companies ask for a GST registration number where our turnover doesn't go beyond that. So what do you do in those cases?
Okay, if you are not registered under GST, you
Okay.
can tell them we are not registered under GST and we are not charging you a separate GST.
Mm.
So you mean your client asks you for GST number?
Yeah,
That's what you
sometimes even the companies where some patients come from companies where they want a GST
Yes.
bill.
Yes. Now the purpose of that is if they invest something in purchasing your service or good,
Yeah.
the GST component which they have paid can be reimbursed or used as an input tax credit for having already paid to a GST registered person. So how the GST system works is, suppose I buy things worth 100 rupees and pay suppose 20 rupees as GST, I pay 120 rupees. Now I sell that thing for 200 rupees and I add GST and get 240 rupees total. So 120 I had paid, out of which 20 I had paid already as GST. Now for 240 I've already paid 20. So I'll deposit only 20 with the government. Similarly, if you will give a GST bill, then they will get that component of GST reimbursed. But there are two factors to it. Factor number one, they will have to show that this was used in furtherance of business and not for personal use of their business. Furtherance of their business, they needed these goods. Secondly, if you have not charged GST, they are not losing anything. Tell them we'll neither charge you GST nor you need to get it reimbursed. You don't need a GST number. We are not having a GST number. And that's good enough. You never charge, they'll never get it reclaimed. That's it.
Mm. Fair enough.
Thank you, sir, for the explanation, because many of us encounter this kind of questions. Is there any question further? Because I don't see anybody. There are two people whom we could not connect. Yeah, Mr. Anil Jain also has another question. I think he is going to ask another one. Let me connect with him.
Unmute me, please, sir.
Yes, please.
Okay. Now, Rajesh, there is a. Can you hear me, Rajesh?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rajesh, there's another problem. What we need to understand is, see, in GST, there are two kinds. We all know that one is composition scheme, one is a regular scheme. For example, mine is a regular scheme and not a composition one. Now, I need to understand one thing which my CA and always come in dispute with each other is, according to the composition scheme, theoretically, we cannot charge the tax on the sale. But all the prices which are, for example, an SLO price list or GKBA price list, have already the prices mentioned are inclusive of GST, the return. Now, theoretically, my CA maintains that you cannot use that price list if you are on a composition scheme, because the prices what you're going to tell the client will actually include GST. Theoretically, the price is what you need to tell your client should be the price written, which says include minus the GST. Now, this controversy somebody needs to solve for me, because we are in regular, so it's okay, no problem. We pay the tax, we cut the invoices as we are supposed to do. And the gentleman before me has asked me this question. The people who are asking this B2B invoices, business to business invoice, because they want to take input credit. And my CA also tells me that if you are in composition, you cannot actually have a invoice. It has to be written as a bill of sale or something like that.
Bill of supply.
Bill of supply. Yeah, correct. That's the word. the question is, see, if I am in composition, because we are paying an awful lot of tax, and I know a couple of my friends who have a business like mine, who initially were in regular, they have converted themselves into a composition because they just generally end up in paying just 1%, but they're actually using the price list which are given by the companies, which all the prices mentioned are inclusive of tax. Now, suppose, for example, if I want to change from regular to composition tomorrow, or maybe end of the financial year, how do I present my price listed to the client? Because see, many of my clients are very informative. So if I show them a MRP uh, list of the prices, and I tell them that I'm in a composition scheme and I cannot give you a GST invoice, then he will immediately say that you can't really charge the GST. Can you put some bit of a light on this confusion which is going on?
You're absolutely right, and it's a good question. Before that, my request to Mr. Kishore Bhandari, please stop sharing the screen because we are seeing your screen only. Mr. Kishore Bhandari, yes, thank you. Okay, now you are absolutely right in explaining, and yes, it will be so. Every composition scheme dealer will issue an invoice which will be kind of retail invoice, not a tax invoice, and on top of their bill will be written a composition dealer not eligible to charge GST. It has to be written on the invoice itself. And yes, he will have to reverse calculate whatever is written there and give the amount of the pricing as it is without the GST relevant. This is where he gets the products more expensive than you do. Now, suppose there is a something for 100 rupees on which he pays 20% GST and it becomes 120, and both of you sell it for 200 and plus GST, say 240, and he sells it for 200 only. He can't sell for 240 because GST cannot charge. So he got a margin of 80 rupees only because 100 plus 20 he had paid. So he gets the goods for 120. While in your case, you collect 240, but what you do is you reimburse that 20. To you, those goods were for 100 rupees, and to him, it was for 120 rupees.
Yeah,
That is
my
where the
question
difference
was
is.
basically, I understand the calculation you're telling me, that's
Yeah.
perfectly clear. My question is, don't you think the companies should now come with up a price list which should say a price plus GST? Instead of giving the price list as they're giving now, which says it's inclusive of all the SRPs, what they're suggesting, actually there is a asterisk and it actually says these prices include GST. Now, this is the one reason my CA has been telling me, boss, you cannot go to composition until you get this corrected. Now, who is going to bell the cat? Who is going to tell SLR or GKB or XYZ that these prices, what you're telling is not correct because they are supplying to both a regular dealer and a composition dealer. So technically speaking, composition dealer is actually charging the GST from the client, quote unquote, and putting it in pocket, which is actually a much bigger offense. Secondly, theoretically, what I was told that every dealer should have on his board written GST, as you said, regular or composition scheme. But I don't see a board in Gurgaon. I mean, right down from the biggest optician to a regular one, which actually clearly says, so until you go and buy stuff from them, we don't look at the invoice and then we come to know what is their GST, because we do get a lot of clients who want to ask this question, boss, if you are in a composition, and they also have this thing that don't you think we should go to a composition dealer, the same thing would be that much amount cheaper? So how do we deal with this problem?
See, what is happening here to cover this up, if you would look at many MNCs, they have taken an undertaking to you that we certify that we are not a composition dealer. On behalf of that one certification which you self-certify, these companies give you a credit note at the end of the year to the total purchase made to compensate you for that little loss. They have already done that. And number two is maybe in Gurgaon, so in Delhi, those people who did not have the GST number written outside their outlets, they were fined 25,000 rupees each. And then there was a lot of hue and cry. And then CBIC, which is the GST office, CBIC issued a notification that from now on the officers will not give directly challan of 25,000 rupees. If the error is easily correctable, they will give them a warning, please do this, and they will come back to see if that correction has been made, so that not everybody is challan and there's a lot of hue and cry. And that little change has been made in the approach of the GST officers. Earlier, they were straight away issuing a challan. So this will happen all over the country. They have perhaps not got time enough to do this, but it will happen. They will check. Composition dealer has to write, composition dealer outside.
And in your suggestion, what shall we do about the price list? Suppose if I do decide, let's say, okay, from tomorrow I want to be a composition dealer, can I continue to show the what is given by the company?
You may show
the pricing.
No problem, you show, but on that you write a little, we will discount the GST component
So
as applicable.
All composition dealers, whosoever are in this field, they cannot charge the price what is being written there. Because it can work in a reverse also. There are a lot of people who can actually, because I know one small optician somewhere in the interior of Gurgaon, he has written, I am a composition dealer, I am cheaper by 18% compared to his competitor actually. But okay, that is the traditional undercut.
That is the manner he has projected, but actually that 18% you have got as a credit note at the end of the year from the company.
No, the problem, no, Mr. Rajesh, there is a correction here, because see, many of the companies, what they were giving, first thing, they were not giving 18%, they were giving a very small amount. But now I've been told, like, I think Luxottica or somebody have stopped now. From now on, they will not give that credit note which they were giving to the regular dealers, and it is very difficult to monitor that regular dealer. And for example, let's come to Essilor. Okay, that was there pertaining to the frames, but when it comes to the lenses, none of the companies been giving any input benefit to the regular customer. So every composition dealer is actually having a ball and having 12% more margin vis-a-vis a regular dealer like myself. So this is how, and I know personally some of my good friends who are in regular, they have quietly changed to composition and they continue to do the business. They have changed the invoices, but it's not written over there that they are not charging, and they continue to show Essilor prices. That's why I'm coming back to Essilor or GKP, because more so in lenses companies, they never gave us a extra refund what you're talking about. It was done by the companies of some, Luxottica and other corps. Safilo used to do it. Okay. But now I've been told that Luxottica.
I got it. Now there are two aspects to this. One is if someone goes against the law, you can't do much about. There are people who have removed the original tags and put in about 30% extra and then give 30% discount. Well, all these malpractices are different. Second aspect is, what does the government want? Government is not concerned what was the price list in terms of your turnover and what you sold for. They just want tax on the amount you charge, the total gross amount charged. Your courier charge put into it, packing charge put into it, everything put into it, what did you charge, and give them tax on that. That's all what government is concerned about. Yes, this malpractice is a separate thing, not following the guidelines of GST, that can be complained of, or other things. There are law enforcement.
Yeah, it is a matter of self-discipline. But when you see on face of it, essentially, see, composition dealer is charging that 12% or 18% respectively on sunglasses and the lenses and frames, and is just ending up in paying just 1% to the government. So even if he has a sale of let's say 5 lakhs, he just ends up in paying 5,000.
True. It's just misuse of the document provided by the company. That's it. Yeah. It's misuse of
that
the
document. That is what I wanted to know. Yes, and
that's it. That's it.
Correct. There's nothing more than. So it's essentially they are in offense right now. If I put it, they are in offense.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Wonderful. That's very good clarification, because that's what I've always maintained. And some of my good friends who have changed from regular to composition, they come and tell me, boss, why are you paying? I say, I don't want to.
Not for too long.
Not for too long. It's going to go down anyhow. So that's what it is. That's really wonderful. Okay, thank you, Rajesh.
Anyone else? Yes, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Right, thank you. Anyone else having question? I don't think so. That because long time this discussion was going on, which is very beneficial for everybody to know, because the people how they are charging from dealer to distributor, everyone. There are no more questions. Probably we can sum up and then end today's program, and look forward to meet once again day after tomorrow, 6 p.m. same time.
Thank you,
Right.
everybody. It was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, buddy.
Thank you
Take
so much. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.